still.
Stays stupid. I don't change.
What's your Grace? She just, that would be weird. She just moves around.
At my agenda meetings, we use the gavel. I know, I only learned from the best. You dropped the ball using the gavel as chair. I'm trying to bring it back. Okay, let's see. So I think all we've got tonight is reviewing the agenda. We do not have any special presentations, do we?
We
Perfect.
don't, but I think we've provided for tonight information that we'll present on Thursday. It's just a lot of information, so thought it would be better for you to get in your hands tonight.
Perfect. That's smart. All right, great.
Dr.
Okay.
Robertson, could Scott and I get a copy of that,
Yes.
please?
All right, we'll go ahead and go through the agenda. We've got our Pledge to the Flag and Meditation by Mr. Williams from Dellwood Middle School. Then we move into our Exemplars of Excellence. Next, we have presentations, which it looks like this piece goes with that presentation. Is that correct? Okay, great. And then we've got the approval of the consent agenda. Is there anything from the consent agenda that we'd like to discuss?
I'd like to just ask a quick question. Is Dr. Corbin still here? I saw him earlier. Okay. Dr. Robertson or somebody, could y'all just speak real quick to the school violence prevention program grant, like kind of what that money will go to?
So it's one of the grants that we've applied for in the past, and I think that this one is mainly going, I'm trying to find it, we'll have to confirm, but mainly going towards updating camera systems throughout the system, and it possibly may involve some secure entrance doors, the auto
Yeah.
lock doors. Here it is. And there is a part that we have to match as well. It's 25%, yeah, but it's mainly cameras in schools.
Okay, so refresh my memory. When we did this and we hardened some exteriors and we did some of that work previously, was this kind of the same grant where we were matching, or did we just spend our own money at that time? I think.
No, a little bit of both. So we've used some of our own money. We've also used that school safety grant money, which is what we'll use as part of the matching here. You're also going to see that there's a request for the third phase of that hardening of entrances. So we've kind of been, getting the phases done. You've seen schools, some of it's slowed down by just supply chain issues, to be honest. And so it's come from that, and also a portion of it came from the sale of the old East Brainerd Elementary. If you remember, 2017, 18-ish, sold that piece of property.
Okay,
Okay,
that's all.
great. Great. Anybody else have anything on the consent agenda?
Can I ask a question about that? Are we're getting pretty close to finishing that up? I know we've done a lot of work on those, hardening those entrances.
We're very, very close. There's some of the ones in this update are
Well, you don't have to tell me which
finishing
ones,
them,
but
then
yeah.
some of them are going back and upgrading some different aspects of them. But we're very, very close to having them all done.
Okay, good deal. Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. I have one question. Because I think it's under business contracts. This MOU with Cornerstone Mental Health, I mean, I know that a lot of what we're talking about now is the importance of investing in mental health resources. Is this new, or is this something that we've had in the past that we are just renewing? So it's AD1B, as I see you all.
I think we've used that.
Okay, that's, yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
That group
it's a
before.
renewal. Okay. That was my question. The other, I'm looking for it, I saw it when I was reading through these earlier, regarding, let me see if I find it, but regarding the auditor's request to write off a couple of losses there. One of them seems small. I mean, they're small in the overall view of our schools. But I also just kind of, and maybe I'll follow up with this you personally, but I'm curious about procedures that are followed afterwards. You know, obviously, missing money, no matter how big or small it is important to all of us. And I just want to make sure that steps are taken or were taken. But I'll follow up that personally. It's necessary here.
So you just wanted to know more about the controls?
Yeah,
Oh.
and then the audit, so do we have an annual audit that is presented when? Like, when do they complete the audit usually?
So there's an internal school funds audit, that's done as a separate audit.
That's not what we're talking about here. though,
This
right?
is a part of it, so that, and then that
Okay, so
rolls
that's
into
fine.
the overall audit that's, I think I sent out a link to you with the ACFR. So it's
Okay.
part of it rolls up into the county audit.
Yeah, and that, like, when is that completed usually?
Usually by the end of the year. Last year, there were some delays with
End
some
of
of
the,
the
end
grant
of the
changes.
fiscal year or end of the?
With the fiscal year.
Okay, so basically the audit is completed about a year after the completion of it, just to kind of figure out the
Yeah.
timing and that. Okay.
Yes.
Back to the Centerstone MOU renewal. Are they still only able to service students with 10 care?
Dr. Ray, do you have information on that?
I think that is correct.
So do we have a MOU with another company or another service that can support our students in the building who may not qualify for 10 care but still need counseling? Or they still have to go out to their own, like,
Yeah, of course, I mean, of course, we've got, obviously our own counselors that can provide resources like that. Dr. Ray, do we still have anything with Helen Ross McNabb?
We don't, but we can check into that. I know they use a sliding fee scale.
yeah, I was just,
Without
I know that,
teachers.
I always think about, when I hear about Centerstone, I always go back to the Woodmore tragedy. And I remember that we had students that went to Woodmore that could not get Centerstone support in building because their parents were at a sustainable working living wage to where they could provide private insurance. So they wouldn't take their Blue Cross or their Cigna or their United Healthcare. And that just has always been a concern of mine because, I mean, I get it, they have insurance, but, I mean, it would benefit their working mom as well, or their working father, to have that service in the building the same way the kids are able to go to Centerstone. So I just didn't know if we could contract
And
with another company, Sound Living, Helen Ross, I can't even think of the other one, but I know there's several others locally. And I just was wondering if we could afford that opportunity
Well,
to
in
families.
some situations where harm's been done, we've contracted with outside providers for any kid that
Okay.
needed support. So this is just on an ongoing basis where their Centerstone is in schools, kids have access to them, you know.
Yeah, I want all of them to have access though. Like, I don't want, I
Me
mean,
too.
you typically see the barrier the opposite way.
Yeah.
This has always just been very strange to me that you can't get it if you have benefits, which, you know, paid benefits of that nature, but you can get it the opposite way. So I was just curious as to what other supports were there.
It'd be nice to find a happy medium there,
Yeah.
Chris. I remember Miss Brown telling me, you know, hey, I've got this student I can send right now, you know, and then I've got this student I can't send right now, and then somebody's got to take off work, come get them, you know, check them out of school. Anyway, yeah, it'd be awesome to, I don't know if we can fix that or not, but it'd be awesome to find a happy medium there.
Great. Okay. Any more questions about the consent agenda? No? Okay. Move on to administrative business matters. We have teaching and learning directors, the purchase of textbook instructional resources. Any comments or questions? Okay, board matters. Charter agreement between HCS and the Chat Academy, and I see that Kelly Kofeld's here, maybe to answer any questions. Okay. Bueller? Bueller, no?
That's all, we've already voted and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much clear.
Yeah.
We've approved it.
Application.
Okay.
Now you got to approve the charter.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and it's.
4 miles.
largely-
And it's for 10 years, is that correct, or something like that? And then, okay.
There's a period after
5 years, you review it after 5, I
Yeah,
think, and then,
They get a planning year,
Okay.
they get, then it's a 10-year charter, but there's a 5-year review period.
okay.
So this charter looks very much like the earlier ones that we've done. It's specific to this particular school, and there are some tweaks to reflect the changes in the law, but basically it's the same
Same
thing.
thing, okay.
Can I ask this, we're on the subject of charters, and I read today about a new charter, but it's not a new charter, it's a charter we renewed,
Which one? I didn't
the Ivy, okay, but it had a different name.
Wait, is it the elementary school?
It's the elementary school.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
but it was I can't, what was it? No, it wasn't.
No, it was
Montessori.
Skillern Elementary.
That one,
Skillern
okay, yeah, but
Elementary.
this is the one we approved as Ivy,
Like a year
but
ago.
they've just added, today when I saw it, I thought, I don't remember reading.
That one, that was.
This is the one in Booker T.
Yeah, but actually, it's Skillern Elementary's gonna have 2. There's gonna be one in Saudi Daisy and one at Booker T.
But it's
But
not
that's not
Ivy.
this, it's not
No,
this.
no, I know that's not this
Yeah.
one, but that was the one that was Ivy.
Yeah,
Like, I don't remember that name, so that name was new to me when I read it,
Yeah,
and I thought.
it was
I-
Skillern
I-
Elementary.
So, okay.
They expanded the grades down.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember we voted for that expansion to Ivy. That's all. I'm less confused now. When I read it in the paper, I'm like, that was.
So for clarity, the elementary branch of Ivy is called Skillern Elementary, and everything else is called Ivy Academy?
mhm. That's under the same charter.
Okay.
It's actually across the street from Ivy Academy, and then there's other one.
Then they were gonna put one.
Booker T. Booker T, yeah.
I guess since Kelly's here, for the sake of you not wasting your time, I'll ask you a question. I guess just with Chat Academy, and putting the charter contract together, I mean, did anything, I know that there was a lot of conversation whenever we were discussing their application. Did anything shift or change from that conversation? It's pretty much just all the same as it was presented?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And Scott, it really falls on Scott and his office, of course, to draw up, because the charter in this case, it just relates to contract. That's our contract with them. So there's nothing, no different really items in their contract than any other school.
Okay, and this school is scheduled to open in August of 2023?
Correct.
Okay.
One
Okay.
more, this is their planning year, and Mr. Perez, to your question about Skillern, they just completed their planning year, so they opened this fall as elementary, and they are 2 different charters. Ivy is a 6-12, and they chartered, and then Skillern has their own charter as an elementary. They will have 2 separate boards that operate
So
the
it is a
schools.
separate.
They do consider themselves separate, even though the
Well,
management
and
is
so maybe that's the
similar.
confusion to your question. Yeah, I remember voting for Ivy, for the, and Skillern. I didn't, when I read it in the paper, it was a new name, but that's where I saw that, that it was Ivy. So here's the bigger question. Again, we know, there is a movement toward charters. The paper addressed that today. I didn't know if this somehow got in without us being aware, but now I understand it's not. It's the one that we voted on a year ago.
Correct.
And with a name that I don't recognize. They may have presented it, I just don't remember that.
They have the same-
I remember Ivy and I remember the discussion.
Right, they have the same executive director, Ivy and Skillern, and they are both environmental science,
Okay,
but they do have 2 separate charters.
thank you.
Thank you.
Great. All right, next item is recommendation for fiscal year '23 school nutrition raises. Any comments or questions on that? Okay. Next item is the approval of the 2023-2024 school calendar. Do we have any questions?
I'm sure we will on Thursday.
Well, we could ask them now.
No,
Yeah.
we can say that. No, so anyways, I mean, did you make the change? I know we went back and forth to which week of vacation. I just know that it's earlier this year and next year, by the way. Nobody thought but me for next year, so.
So next year's calendar, we haven't amended. So
I
next
know.
year's spring break is still at the late
Like
window.
in May.
For the 23-24 calendar, the one that you're seeing here has the spring break at March 11th through 15th. So we
The
just
end
had
of
to
third
adjust.
quarter?
Yes.
Okay.
We just had to adjust a date at the end so that we could balance out all the 180 days.
All right. But next year's still a long year.
Correct. Unless we bring the calendar back.
Yeah.
But I assume people have made plans around.
It's still
the existing
180
spring break.
days.
It's
Where
still
you put the
180
day, I mean, it's like moving the furniture around the Titanic, it's still 180 days. I mean, you can move it wherever you want, but it's still 180 days.
But
So-
next year Easter's at a different time anyway. I mean, we had this on the.
Yeah,
different
that's
time
fine.
every year.
That's fine. We won't go into next year. We're going to what's on the agenda.
I mean, who's looking that far in advance in their like life right now? I mean, I'm like living hour to hour at this moment, so I just don't. That's great. I'm good with any calendar. Okay, anything else on that? No? Next is the position or request approval of COVID-19 contact tracing manager. Could you actually tell us more?
Sure.
Yeah, please tell us more
This is
about
actually
that.
just a name change and a job description change for our current COVID-19 contact tracing managers. So it will be kind of updating the protocol again as we go into a new school year to be in line with how the community is responding to COVID-19 as well. With that said, we can actually update the job description of our COVID-19 contact tracing managers to be more focused around long-term COVID, like student health concerns in our school. So you'll see in that job description, it's kind of more focused around how do we do student health initiatives in the school, how do we do our acuity screeners and utilize those people as we finish up the last year on the ELC grant. These are all grant-funded positions. It's just a name change, and we wanted to be transparent with that.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Do we-
Right. And
I need to
oh
add
yes,
something here.
please go ahead.
I just had this discussion with Justin earlier about a reading interventionist at Soddy Elementary. It seems that we're losing. To be honest with you, I think we need a reading interventionist at Soddy more than we do a COVID person again. I mean, seriously, are we still doing the contract tracing? I mean, you think we're gonna still need this position for it to be a full-time position to do this?
Sure. So they're grant funded out of the ELC grant. I don't remember what ELC stands for. Somebody.
So it's still out of part of the COVID
It's like
money that we
yeah,
have.
it is a very specific health grant that we're funding these positions out of that have to be COVID related, which is why we're adjusting this to be more around long-term COVID health. But it does have to be a health related position if we use it out of
Well,
that
it's
grant.
health related, because I'm gonna be sick if we lose this position. But oh, I will be. Especially if I find out everybody else still has one, we don't, I will be.
Yeah, I've got to get, again, information. She's talking about a reading interventionist position. I don't know, got the email right before we got in here. I think it's attached to, if y'all remember out of ESSER2, there were dollars approved for each school to use as they saw fit. And I think it was coming out of that, and those funds, were just expended until they run out. So I'm pretty sure it's that, but I need to confirm.
So then that decision would have been on the school administrator?
Correct. But again, it's because those funds would have run out.
Okay. Next item is Director of Maintenance Maintenance and Operations, bid file 22 to 24, security upgrade phase 3, final phase. I assume that this is.
This is exactly what Ms.
Okay.
Thurman was
Yep,
asking about
perfect.
earlier, about the update on where we are. This was, the final. I'll be honest with you that we were considering putting this off just because, we got one bid. It's the people that have done the previous phases for us, so we've worked with them, but you only get one bid. It makes you wonder if it's the best price, but it's similar increase what we've seen, the last 3 or 4 months in terms of pricing for things, and we feel like it's important to go ahead and get this done.
Does this item tie into our discussion on school safety? No. Okay.
Well, yes
Okay.
and no.
Yeah.
It does because, again, we want to see school safety as a continuum of services all the way from Ms. Jones's point about mental health services to, the question about how we harden entrances. I mean, there are a lot of steps that go into it.
Yeah.
Conversations I've had with individual board members, I think that discussion of school safety is around how we partner with other municipalities. There's a number of municipalities within Hamilton County that have police forces. How do we work to get additional funding, maybe through grants or additional funding from the state or from the county, make sure we have armed personnel in all of our buildings. So it's conversations like that.
Gotcha. Great, okay. Then the last item is discussion of school safety. I know that was something that I emailed the board about. I'm sure we can hold the discussion until Thursday, but if anybody has any comments or questions that they want to put out there now, feel free to.
Are you just gonna give us an update about where we are, or what are we gonna do Thursday? What is the discussion gonna look like on Thursday?
I mean, it's a request of the board. I can
Okay.
certainly give you an update on conversations I've been able to meet with. By then, I will have met with East Ridge, Soddy Daisy, Signal Mountain, and Red Bank about conversations I have with them. We had a meeting last week at Emergency Management Services about response and steps that we can take prior to. So I think it's just conversations about that. What I would hope that we can get to is a request that we have from these different municipalities. And I've told them, some of them are smaller, like Soddy Daisy, for example. I think they've got 19 officers, so it's not a request maybe of all of them to say put personnel. But what we did talk about, and a lot of them are already doing this, is during the day as you're patrolling, pull in the school and walk around the school, right? Check some doors, you know, be present. If you need a place to work, we'll give you an office to sit and do some paperwork while you're on duty. And so it's stuff like that. But I think it's also, I would like to get to a point where we have a request of what it's going to take to get armed personnel in every one of our buildings. So right now, you know, there are a number that still do not have armed personnel, and it's a decision that we've got to make.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, and this is actually a retired principal, and he's not one of my retired principals on my side. He's on the other side of the pond over here. But he said that one of the problems that he saw was, he said a lot of teachers didn't take these drills that they had seriously, very lax in that. He said it's time that they really got serious when they do these drills, and really had all kinds of game plans in their head about what they were going to do, because every situation is going to be different. It's not like a hurricane or a tornado drill or something like that. Every situation is going to be different. You can play out different kinds of scenarios and things. But his main concern was, he said his faculty he could never get his faculty to take it very seriously when they had these drills. And he said that was one of his main concerns, and I just thought I'd put that out there for you.
Well, I think that an update from you would be great, especially as you're having these conversations. But also my request was really just to kind of talk openly about the conversation as a board, and knowing that this upcoming legislation season will certainly have school safety legislation written up and probably, you know, pushed to pass. And I just think that the more that we can start thinking about how we can be engaged in that conversation, that would be ideal. So this is really meant to be more of like a proactive conversation. So
I think it's also to help the community know in advance that we are doing some
Absolutely.
things
Absolutely.
that a lot of people don't think about. You know, all the municipal police departments have keyless access to our buildings, right?
Wow.
Simple
Yeah, I
solution
did not know that.
you know,
Yeah.
that nobody knows, but that we've made sure that they've got fobs, so that if we've updated doors, all they have to do is come and swipe it, and they can go.
Wow.
So,
And we also numbered all the windows in
yeah,
the
we're doing
buildings.
stuff like that, and,
Yeah.
and it's just, again, but I think that we kicked this, like, we again had this hard conversation 2 years ago, and we got 19 SSOs, we've got 32 SROs, 2 from Chattanooga Police, but that still leaves a number of buildings that don't have anyone, and we make hard decisions about why the school gets one and doesn't. We're not talking about a large number.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems large when you say it, but it's about $1.7 to $1.8 million that we could put a armed security officer in the remaining buildings. And regardless of the size of the building, doesn't really matter, right? And so at some point, I want y'all to help me decide where do we ask and when do we ask. And
Absolutely.
This is exactly the reason I've been talking to Scott. You heard me earlier talking to Scott about legal issues about arming school personnel, and I'm not talking about arming teachers and the volunteers inside the school. Where we are in the state, where we stand in the state, and stuff like that. And I'd like to get some more clarification, Scott, as soon as we can, to kind of figure out what our options will and will not be if that discussion ever happens here. It may at some point.
Sure. The state of the law right now, as I understand it, is that if you have a handgun carry permit, you can leave a weapon in the vehicle, unloaded and secured, but you can't carry it into a school building. I know that there has been a lot of discussion over the years about the General Assembly changing that. My understanding is that the impediment to this point has always been insurance and liability issues. SROs are obviously trained to de-escalate threats. They utilize what is referred to in the profession as the force continuum, which starts with low-level force, officer presence, verbal commands, soft hand techniques, etc. So they have a wide array of tools at their disposal, and they're trained to use each of these. The concern by the insurance carriers has always been, if you give someone a handgun, sort of like the adage, if your only tool is a hammer, all your problems look like nails. A layman might not have the same ability to react with less than lethal force. And so that's been the real tension. It hasn't been an unwillingness to address the issue. It's recognizing that there are certain liability issues that you create by trying to solve the problem. It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, well, I've been looking at it across the country. That's one of the things I've been spending my time reading. A lot of schools that have been doing it, some of them for 20 years, and seeing the problems that they've had, and if there are any. But anyway, I just wanted to know what our laws were here and what our options were.
I understand it's one of those things that is in the present environment, it really does raise a lot of questions.
Because SROs get sick, SROs take off, SROs go to eat lunch. SROs aren't always there. I know in some municipalities they'll give you a police officer unless they have another emergency and they have to call them out, and those kinds of things happen. So those are the kind of things that concern me. Not just that, and you could have an SRO, and some of our schools are big. It's SRO on one side of the school and something happened on the other side of the school, and it takes a while. Sometimes 90 seconds is a long time, some of these school shootings that have happened. But anyway, we can talk about it later. I just like I said, I just like to be clear on who I need to talk to, whether it's state legislators or if we need to go to risk management or who we need to.
Well, certainly the General Assembly can change the law, but if they did, we would certainly need to be sure that our insurance coverage would follow suit. But within this conversation that you and I are having, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that our school security officers. The conversation that we had maybe a year or so ago when we were developing this program was it was a stopgap measure, but I think what I have seen from my perspective, working with Dr. Corbin and training them and just talking to them, I think that's a disservice to the professionalism of these folks to say that they're a stopgap measure. And once upon a time, we said that the gold standard was an SRO. I'm just going to say that in my experience of talking with these folks, these are highly qualified retirees from law enforcement, whether it's the sheriff's department or the police department or TBI or some other law enforcement agency. These folks are highly qualified professionals who have reached that point in their career where maybe they don't want to get called out by the sheriff to go deal with a riot at Silverdale. They want to work in schools, and from what I can see from my perspective, their professionalism is second to none. I think this has been a tremendously successful program that Dr. Robertson and Dr. Corbin developed a couple of years ago, and honestly, it shows a tremendous amount of foresight And at this point, there are districts around the state who are asking the question, can we do that too? I've gotten a number of calls from very small districts who are having the problem that you described. Small sheriff's departments, they're having a hard time keeping SROs in the buildings, and they've seen what Hamilton County has done. This is a great success, and so I think if we can build on it, I think the board would be very well served.
I think you're correct. Thank you.
I'd just like to say quickly, for me, Thursday, I'd love to just hear again about, as Dr. Robertson already said, the municipalities, kind of the conversations, their willingness to get involved. And we're going to talk about these things, but the final phases of the hardening of schools, the entrances, the exits, the access points, all those things. And then lastly, what is it going to take? Like for security personnel, what's it going to take to be covered? And I'd love to see us hit on those main 3 points, and then anything else that we hear when it comes to how the law may or may not change, what other folks are doing around the country, so that we can kind of see that on the horizon and be thinking about the possibilities. If something were to change, then those will be the things I'd want to see.
Great. Yes, please, everyone, bring your thoughts as well. And Dr. Robertson, if you can prep those talking points too, that'd be great. Okay, moving into our delegates, we've got 3 delegates so far for Thursday night, and that wraps up our meeting.
Let me ask you one other thing, and I'm going to make this meeting a little bit longer because I want to talk about our long meetings. I talked to Justin about this. Yeah, I just, this board needs to decide whether we want to have presentations every meeting or just on an as-needed basis, or if something like this right here, I don't know how long it's going to take to go through this presentation, but I'm saying it's going to be a while.
It's going to be a short one
It's gonna be a short
Thursday,
one.
but do you want to mention the idea of possibly moving stuff?
Yeah,
to
maybe
tonight?
to Monday
Yeah,
night
that
for a
makes sense.
presentation or something, because we used to just have one meeting and it lasted maybe 2, maybe
Yeah.
3 hours sometimes. Now we have 2 3-hour meetings a lot of times. I just think, and ever since the TSBA told us we were meeting too much, we've met more. Which is really true. And so I just think it's something we need to decide as a board if it's necessary to have something every meeting, or just maybe on every quarter have an update
Yeah.
or something like that.
I don't know if we
Something
ever,
talked
because
about.
at some point we also talked about
Having like an open.
the delegations being
Yeah,
Monday
Monday
night
nights.
as well. I don't know, it'd be something to talk
I
about.
wouldn't mind doing that personally, because I think that the more we can focus on the voting items on the night of our voting agenda, I think the more effective we'll be. Moving the presentations and delegations to another night would be good.
I've got to mention this so we can get it on the agenda Thursday. We had a donation come from Sabrina Smedley, Commissioner for District 7, for some of the discretionary bond funds that she has to go to East Hamilton High School for their track. It's $1,170.74. So this will be on the agenda Thursday night, but I just had to say it so we could get it on there.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could mention about the present, I'm sorry.
I've got one more too. So we had school nutrition pay raises on the agenda. We're going to put SACC on there
Oh, good. Okay.
as well, and that will kind of deal, like how we've been saying, get everybody there. We were just crunching some numbers and took us a little bit more time. So that'll be on there as well.
Good.
So, one of the things about presentations, I understand that it tends to drag a meeting, but one of the things that this board, I think, needs to remember is that with Dr. Johnson, we moved to a performance-based contract where we were evaluating key performance indicators.
Yes.
And so that's been one of the things that's very different from our old form contract, where it was basically, it wasn't tied to specific outcomes. And so where the presentations are designed to keep the board up to date on the outcomes that you're using to evaluate your superintendent, I think it's useful in a public meeting for your superintendent to tell you, here's how I'm doing on the areas where you are evaluating me. And so you can push back and say you're not going in the right direction, if that's the case, or you can say that's great, keep loading the wagon. So I would hesitate to change that too much, because that's a very valuable tool for you to give him feedback so he knows whether he's pursuing the goals you want him to pursue.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Oh, we could look at a format similar to city council, where they do,
I don't know what their format, yeah,
say
tell
they
tell
do
us more.
agenda session.
The
like
same day.
3:30, and then they break and come back at 6.
I personally wouldn't mind.
City council does, so they do agenda
do it all
session
one day.
early, like they do agenda session at like 3 or 3:30. And then if it's a committee report or a committee meeting, they do that in between at like 4 or 4:30. Then they break and they come back at 6. They have council and they're done, all in one Tuesday.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that.
It does elongate your day, but it does, I mean, you
But
know
it
that
knock
that
all
day.
out. It's better than 2 nights.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
makes that one day devoted. And if you look
Yeah.
at the staff, I
How
mean,
would
they're
that
already
work for
here at
you?
3:30 anyway, or 3 o'clock. I mean, they're here to 4 at least every day.
Yeah. Well,
So
we
it's
have
not
we
like-
have we have a meeting oftentimes at 4 o'clock anyway on Thursdays. Like,
We have it early.
I'd be open to it. I mean, I think we just need to discuss it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we probably maybe would like make this change in September, whenever the new board
Mhm.
members are on, so it
Because
doesn't
we're
really
gonna
make
have
sense
2
to.
more board members, we can be here all
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
One more question on the meetings. Like I notice our delegates are gonna talk about personal issues. I've said it before, I want everybody to be able to address the board. Is there any concern when people deal with very specific, and I'm looking more at you from a legal perspective, liability, like very specific issues with their specific child in a school, like a bullying issue, or is there nothing we need to be concerned about publicly? Because this is a public meeting
Sure.
and somebody has the
It's live streamed.
mic. Hmm?
It is live streamed.
And it's live streamed, and we may be and somebody may say, and Justin did to me, and now suddenly we have a very public accusation that doesn't have an opportunity for counter.
I agree.
And so it's to me this hard balance of I want the community to speak to us any and every time they want to speak to us. But there may be a lack of awareness that there are legal ramifications to that opportunity that they're taking for
So-
everybody involved, including us.
And your question, Mr. Perez, strikes at a conversation that the board had, and I had with the board years ago when we created the open comment section. Initially, there was a very limited public comment section. And then it was about agenda items, and what the board chose to do is open it up. And one of the concerns was exactly what you just talked about. Once you do that, what are the guardrails? And there really aren't any. The Supreme Court's made it very clear, once you create an open forum, you can turn off that forum only if someone's creating an actual disruption. And obscenity would be along those lines.
So we could have stopped an obscene.
No, you could
Okay.
not, because, and that's the dicey piece, because the argument would be, okay, so what is the purpose of this? Well, and I don't mean to go down an entire constitutional discussion about what is an obscenity, but there's several exceptions to what is obscene speech. If there's a political purpose, then it's probably not obscene. And certainly what we've heard was political, voicing concerns about things that are in the library. So to the question that you asked, if you have a student or I have a parent who says, my student, Johnny, is being bullied by this other kid, Marco, there is not a lot that we can do. And it creates a very ticklish situation, which is why initially this board was very concerned about this. And it's also why I have encouraged this board to think about doing those kinds of delegations on a Monday night where the board can hear and can maybe offer feedback. What you could also do, and this is what a lot of boards do, Bradley County being one of them, is if it concerns an individual student, like you can talk about anything you want, but if it concerns a student, that needs to be taken to the director and we won't hear it in public. So you can fence off and say because of privacy concerns, but what that means is it applies to everybody. And so like any consideration about bullying where you want to talk about an individual student, even your own student, that's out of bounds. So we could do that, but we don't have that in our policy right now.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, and it's fine, like, if there's no liability issue, I mean, there is for a person who calls out somebody publicly.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is a public forum.
This is
Yeah.
a public forum, and they may not be aware they're exposing themselves to a liability issue there. But if there's not on our behalf, we did not, by opening the forum, we are not assuming liability in that regard.
I think like to a similar point, I think what bothers me about our current process for delegates is that we cannot speak back to them, and so like the speaker is opening up theirself to liability, but also it does us no good to not be able to dialogue with them either.
Well, we
And-
can, we can.
Yes, we can. We just don't,
Yeah.
and we could if we had it if this was in a different format.
The way our policy is set up is that
Yeah.
it's their forum, and so they get their 5 minutes
And I understand that.
to address the board. And precisely because of, that's one of the guardrails that this board has put in place, is that you don't want to get too far into the weeds and invite someone to say something that could cross the line.
Yeah, but that is current. I mean, that's happening right now, or there is a lot of crossing of the line happening. Like people are coming every week or every month and like speaking about specific student incidences, and it's like we have no ability to like
they're
verify
choosing to-
anything.
But they're the ones exposed.
I was gonna say, but they're choosing
liability.
to
Okay.
to share that private.
If they
They're choosing to share their FERPA, not us.
Right, so if I come before the board and I say, my child has been bullied by Marco, well, Marco's parent may say, well, you just defamed Marco, and I'm going, and at that point, let the games begin. I mean, but we're not involved.
But we're not involved.
But
And that's
we're not-
what, I mean, I don't mean to dismiss, I think it's important, but
No.
that was where my question was, is do we, because I feel uncomfortable.
Well, and here's the why.
Yeah.
We're not involved legally, but we've created the forum.
Exactly.
And so I think what you're feeling is a sense of responsibility that is not attached to liability. And again, that goes back to why for a really long time we had a very, very restrictive public comment policy, because there was a recognition. Let's take an individual employee. You have an individual employee who has absolutely no ability to defend himself or herself in this forum. Maybe he isn't even at the meeting. If the person wants to spend 5 minutes lambasting an employee, that's why we have been much more conservative than we could have been. But having had more relaxed rules, you now have the camel's nose, and it's clearly under the tent. And so I do think that the board, and I said this before when we talked about it 6 months ago, I do believe that the board does need to get its arms around this and either move it to Monday or start restricting the nature of the comments and saying some of these things really are
They should be addressed.
they should be addressed differently.
I'll just say, I think the suggestion back then was on board meeting night, limit delegations to those who are speaking directly to items on the agenda. I think that cures a lot. It's not going to fix everything, but what we've been dealing with over the last couple of years, and rightly so, because people have been upset about a myriad of things, this is the place where there's a hot mic and a camera. They're not going to go to commission meeting on 9 o'clock Wednesday morning because they're at work. And a lot of what they deal with is actually done at the state level, but they can't get in front of their state legislators. But we're here prime time on a Thursday evening, again with a hot mic and a camera, and we've said it's open season. And so that's a lot of why we've been here 3 hours when we've had meetings, whereas this is a business meeting, and it is a meeting in the public, not of the public. It's just not. If there's an item on the agenda, that the public wants to address as we do our business, I absolutely want to hear from them. If there's another issue there's an appropriate time to do that, and it's not at the night of our business meeting. We can set aside another night, as we've talked about before, and absolutely bring all of your issues, bring whatever it is that you're upset about, and let's do that at a separate time. But the night of formal business, if it's on the agenda, speak to it. If it's not, we'll set aside another time for you to come do that.
I don't know, some nights we haven't had any delegates and they still lasted 3 hours, so.
That's usually my fault.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Great.